In this video, we're going to conduct a hypothesis test for problems involving the difference between means. And so if we click on Stat and we scroll over to Tests, we are now going to look at option 4, which is the two-sample t-test. And so here, if we want to type in our statistics, I actually already had some of these filled in from the last video. And so you're always going to fill in your sample mean, your sample standard deviation, and your sample size for your first population. And then you're going to do the same thing for a second population. And so from our previous video, we were actually looking at the difference between the GPAs of student athletes versus all other students at a university. And we were conducting a test to test if the GPAs of the athletes were greater than the GPAs of all other students. And so in the problem, we were given a sample mean of 3.07 for our student athletes, which was population 1, and we were given a sample standard deviation of 1.5. And then for our sample size, it was still 34, and then we had a sample mean of 2.96 for all other students. And we were given a sample standard deviation of 1.2 for all other students with a sample size of 102. Now, just make sure you keep track of your first population and your second population. When you mix up these values, that's where you can make a mistake. And so again, we were conducting a greater than problem, so we're going to use the option for greater than mu2. And you don't need to worry about the pooled option for this test. And one thing to note, again, we have an unknown population standard deviation, which is why we use the t distribution. And so when we go to calculate all of these problems, I'm going to use the draw option so that it gives me my test statistic and p-value. We conducted a greater than test, which is shown here, and we're given our p-value of 0.3498. And we also have a t-value, or our t-score, that we're going to report of 0.3882. When you interpret the problem, you need to compare p to alpha, and then you state whether you reject or fail to reject your null hypothesis, and then you state if you have sufficient or insufficient evidence when concluding. If you need help with the interpretations, you can go back to the previous video on hypothesis testing for the difference between means.